Childhood is meant to be a time of innocence.
We watch children play Little League. We watch them color pictures in front of us. How can that child take another life?
For a 10-year-old girl, killing is just another game.
It was no surprise to me that Mary began killing. The only surprise is that she did it so soon.
A schoolyard plot ends in murder without mercy.
She started reciting the Lord's Prayer. Obviously, she knew she was going to die.
And teenage passion explodes in a bloody rampage.
I will prove to you how much I love you by killing my grandparents.
These are deadly women who are not yet women. They are the Youngbloods. Northern England, late 1960s. The industrial city of Newcastle is about to lose its innocence. And one mother's life will be destroyed.
My son Martin was 4.5. He was happy, bundle of fun, laughed all the time.
June Richardson, remembering the son that went out to play and never came home.
He was my first child, and he used to run around the house singing "We All Live in a Yellow Submarine." That was his favourite song. And he was just a lovely little chap.
One afternoon in May 1968, a construction worker makes a shocking discovery. Martin Brown's tiny body lying lifeless on the floor of a derelict house.
Get an ambulance, man. Get an ambulance!
A knock came on the door, and it was one of the women from up the street. She said, "Martin's been hurt," and that's all she said.
June races to the scene, confronting a mother's worst nightmare.
And he was just white, lifeless. There was a bit of blood trickling down his face. I knew he was dead then.
The autopsy shows no marks on the body or evidence of poisoning. His death is ruled accidental. Only one person knows this isn't true. An angel-faced girl, age 10. Mary Bell is Martin Brown's killer.
While other 10-year-old children are out playing with dolls, having sleepovers with their friends, picnics, amusement parks, Mary Bell is killing.
Crime writer M. William Phelps has studied Mary's case closely. He can see why no one would suspect a child.
We watch children play Little League. We watch them color pictures in front of us in a coloring book. How can that child take another life? It's just unfathomable.
Ex-FBI profiler Candace DeLong is also surprised. Normally, little girls just don't kill.
Young female killers are very rare. We see it more in male killers who will focus on killing animals and grow up to kill people.
But young girls can be much more dangerous.
Young female killers, sometimes they kill animals, but generally they'll go for people a lot sooner than little boy killers will.
When Martin Brown runs into Mary Bell on a sunny May afternoon, he has no reason to fear her. Martin thinks he's going to play a game.
She knelt him down and she put her hands around his neck. She told him she was trying to make his throat better. And she strangled him.
It doesn't take much pressure at all. As a matter of fact, the younger the child, the easier it is to do.
Forensic pathologist Janice Amatuzio knows just how Mary was able to kill without being detected.
Sometimes, if suffocation or strangulation are done gradually or lightly, there may be very few external marks.
Mary gets away with murder. But does a young child realize what they've done?
A child's personality and brain are still developing, so they are going to lack the ability to fully understand what they're doing. They may understand that they're killing, but not why or the consequences, that the person they're killing is not going to wake up.
Mary seems to understand death all too well. She makes a macabre visit to Martin's grieving mother.
About 2 days after, a knock came to the door. And it was Mary Bell standing at the door.
Hello, Mrs. Richardson.
And she said, I've come to see Martin. And I just turned around and I says, I'm sorry, darling, but Martin's dead.
Oh, no.
Oh, she says, I know he's dead. She says, I want to see him in his coffin.
What turns a 10-year-old into a killer? Mary carries many more dark secrets than the death of Martin Brown. And she wants people to know.
She tells kids in school, she even tells a family member, but no one seems to believe her.
She wrote a diary where she actually drew the way Martin was lying in the house. And she put on, I killed Martin Brown, you'll never catch me.
She also writes an eerie message. I murder so that I may come back. Mary will be back. Something is driving her to kill again.
I believe that Mary knew that killing was wrong, but she chose to do it anyway.
She's just kind of putting her toes in the water, if you will. She's just testing the water. She wants to kill. She's developed the instinct to kill.
Mary Bell watched all the grief of my grief, and then she goes out a few months after and does it all over again.
The city of Newcastle in northern England has a killer in its midst. No one suspects a 10-year-old girl, Mary Bell. But Mary isn't like the other children playing on the streets. Her home life is dark and sadistic.
The mother was a well-known prostitute in the town. Mary, at an early age, begins to see her mother performing sexual acts. And many of the sexual acts that she performed were violent sexual acts.
Betty Bell was 17 when she gave birth to Mary. She made many attempts to abandon her child and even tried to poison her with pills.
Mary became a killer because of the horrible things she was subjected to at the hands of someone who was supposed to love her. Mary's mother made her the killer that she became.
A month after getting away with the murder of Martin Brown, Mary is preparing to kill again.
Mary Bell was known to be a bully with other children. She was just the kind of kid she used to have to be top dog.
One girl barely escapes a game that goes too far. Mary's next target won't be so lucky.
We just couldn't believe he was only 3. Blonde hair, blue eyes, beautiful little thing.
Mary finds 4-year-old Brian Howe playing in the street. This time she has a friend with her, 13-year-old Norma. Once again, she strangles her victim.
Imagine a 3 or 4-year-old gasping for air, kicking and screaming, trying everything he could do to survive. I can tell you that strangulation is not a fun way to die.
Supported by a partner in crime, Mary becomes much more violent.
What's different about the second murder is Mary begins to develop her signature. She begins to develop a way that she's gonna now start to kill and leave her mark on her victims.
She decided to cut him. She actually cut her initials. She cut her M and N in, Mary Norma.
Serial killers leave all kinds of the trademarks at a crime scene because they want to stage a cat and mouse with the cops, number 1. Number 2, they want to get caught.
Mary leaves one more horrific calling card, a clue about a terrible secret in her life.
She tried to cut his little private parts off. It's just totally unbelievable.
When Mary killed little boys, as we know, she also appeared to be sexually involved with the body. This is all recreating the terrible crime that was done to her.
Mary's mother, Betty Bell, had done more than expose her young daughter to violent sexual acts.
She looks lovely.
She had involved her in them.
In some cases, she was invited into it and made to perform sexual acts herself as a child, some very vile sexual acts.
Come on. Sit down. Sit down.
Mary made the statement, "I like to hurt things weaker than me." In hurting things weaker than her, she was recreating when she was the weak one being hurt by an adult, either sexually or physically.
Mary's strange behavior is starting to be noticed. As Brian Howe's tiny coffin is carried out of his house, a policeman sees a familiar face. It's Mary Bell, smiling. The unthinkable is now becoming possible. Could this 10-year-old be the killer?
Children differ from adults when they kill in that they rarely cover up their crimes well, and they don't generally have the cunning and guile to fool a lot of people about what they did.
Mary's friend Norma admits the murder to police.
Into the house.
Mary won't confess so easily. But the evidence is mounting.
Where have you seen that?
Written admissions, drawings of Martin Brown's crime scene, and the bloody M carved into Brian Howe's stomach. Police have a case. June Richardson is there in court for the judgment of her son's killer.
She just sat there and she smiled and danced and turned her head round asking for sweets. I just couldn't believe this person had destroyed my life, and she was laughing.
Mary is sentenced to lifetime detention. But because of her age, the judge orders it to be reconsidered as she grows older. The court never hears the details of Mary's family life.
All the things that Mary's mother did to her, trying to overdose her with tranquilizers, abandoning her, and then eventually involving her in sex acts with her clients, her prostitution clients, basically were the underpinnings of creating a monster. The only big question regarding this case is, why wasn't Mary's mother put in prison for the rest of her life?
After 12 years in juvenile institutions, Mary is deemed safe to be released on parole. Today, she has a new identity and lives in anonymity. She also has a child of her own. She has never offended again.
I think she should have served the rest of her life in prison. And I certainly disagree with her being able to have children or grandchildren. I don't know if you know, but it is Mother's Day today, and I'm missing a Mother's Day card.
A young murderer doesn't start killing out of the blue. It's hard to accept the warning signs from a child, but missing them can be deadly. Fayetteville, Georgia. A quiet, sleepy city of God-fearing folk.
One of the neat things about living here is just to see how people have a love for God.
Local Reverend Glenn Stringham tends to a tight-knit Baptist congregation. When something is amiss, he finds out fast. In August 2004, it came in a phone call from a concerned parishioner.
She called me on the phone, she said, Glenn, she says, I don't know what's going on, but something has to be happening at the Colliers. I've been trying to call them. I can't raise them. I'm not sure what happened, but something's going on.
Carl and Sarah Collier are in their 70s. A kindly couple who rarely miss a Sunday in church.
Both of them very outgoing, very helpful. If we were going somewhere, they were first on the scene. They didn't wait for somebody to ask them. They were first to help.
Reverend Stringham's congregation are about to face a test of faith and forgiveness. The Colliers have been found brutally murdered in their home, stabbed over 20 times each.
This crime scene in particular was probably the most bloody, horrifying, violent crime scene I've ever seen in my life.
Adding to the horror, the identity of one of the killers. It's the victim's granddaughter, Holly Harvey. She is 15 years old.
Holly is one of the most dangerous teenage offenders I'm aware of.
She was not a Sunday school girl. She was not a girl that would adhere to the Collier's rules. Holly wanted to do what Holly wanted to do, irregardless of any rules and regulations set forth by the Colliers.
Author Dale Hudson needed to know, what turns a teenager into a killer? In researching a book on the case, Dale soon discovers that Holly Harvey's problems began at home.
Her mother and her father had divorced at an early age. Holly was left to the care of her mother. There were a lot of parties. There was a lot of inappropriate social behavior, a lot of immoral behavior, and Holly was pretty much left to herself.
It only gets worse when Holly's mother is jailed on drug charges. The Colliers do what they think is right and take in their wayward granddaughter. But the strict rules of a retired Baptist couple are not for her.
She was not a child that was going to be obedient. She was accustomed to living her own life. Holly's mother, Carla, allowed her to smoke marijuana. Carla allowed her daughter to live a promiscuous lifestyle without any boundaries.
It's a lifestyle that's incubating a killer.
Although there are plenty of sullen teenagers, not all of them have the childhood history that Holly did. Holly was hell-bent for a path of destruction starting much earlier in her life. This was in Holly's soul long before the night it happened.
Boiling with anger and resentment, Holly finds a soulmate, 16-year-old Sandy Ketchum.
There were a lot of similarities between Holly and Sandy. They both grew up without the parental guidance that most children get. They both grew up in a dysfunctional family. They had been abandoned by their parents and left to their own. They sought solace and they found comfort in each other.
Sandy and Holly are inseparable. They take drugs together and begin a sexual relationship. Holly is now on a collision course with her conservative grandparents. It will end in catastrophe.
For many teenagers, every relationship is a matter of life and death. They must have it or they will die. Sometimes that's taken to an extreme.
Age 77 and 73, Carl and Sarah Collier are at their wits' end. Their 15-year-old granddaughter, Holly, lives under the Colliers' roof, but not under their control.
I think it had to do with the fact that her grandparents said, look, you're in our house, we do want you to live by the rules, and she didn't want to live by the rules.
Holly's drug taking is a problem. So is her lesbian lover, Sandy. Old-fashioned discipline is met with frightening threats.
They were at a loss of what to do. Even when Holly begins to threaten them and say that I'm going to kill you, they still could not imagine that their 14-year-old grandchild, the one that they had loved and nurtured, would be saying things like that to them.
Most children, teenagers, do not say, I want to kill you or I will kill you. As hard as it is for a parent or a grandparent to listen to that, they must act on it for the benefit of the child and to save their own life.
The Colliers can't accept the warning signs. They respond with a threat of their own, sending her to a children's home. Holly is cornered.
Holly's first and immediate thought was, then I'll be separated from Sandy. I'll be separated from the person that I love the most.
The most important part of her life is at risk.
She was not going to let that relationship die. And anything that got in the way of that relationship, she was determined to get rid of, including the Colliers.
A terrible urge is building inside this 15-year-old. She enlists her girlfriend, Sandy, in a shocking plot.
I will prove to you how much I love you by killing my grandparents.
On the eve of the killing, Sandy sneaks into Holly's bedroom, and their deadly plan takes shape.
Part of Holly's plan for murder was to compose a to-do list. On her forearm, she wrote 4 words. These were her cue words for murder: kill, keys, money, and jewelry.
The to-do list that Holly wrote on her arm indicates a level of extreme detachment from the violence that was about to happen.
Because Sandy was already there and already involved, Holly gave her a knife.
Holly knows the smell of marijuana will lure her grandparents downstairs.
She instructed Sandy to hide behind the bed. It would be an ambush of 2 with a large butcher knife against a defenseless and an aged couple.
As the Colliers investigate, Holly springs her trap, stabbing her grandmother in the back. What she doesn't count on is Carl Collier fighting back.
Carl wrestled Holly to the bed and was able to subdue her.
Carl Collier desperately fights for survival with his own granddaughter.
Holly has a big, bloody knife. Carl Collier only has his hands for defense. She cuts the phone cord. Holly stabs him several times.
Holly isn't finished.
Sandy says to Holly, "Your grandmother's alive. Maybe we can get help for her." "No, she needs to die. The bitch will die." She begins to stab her repeatedly, over and over again, until she is assured that her grandmother is dead.
Dripping in blood, the two young girls stand in a scene of shocking devastation.
It was unimaginable, the most horrifying thing that anyone had to have stepped into.
I think the fact that Holly chose to use a knife for the killings speaks of her disregard for life and her hatred and rage. That's a hands-on crime, which is hard to understand because these are people that were trying to help her. Holly didn't want anybody's help. Holly was angry.
Sarah had 35 stab wounds, and Carl had 23. When I see that many wounds, I think about rage. That's many more wounds than you need to cause somebody's death. And it says to me that an individual was either on drugs, their mind was altered, or that they were incredibly angry.
The image of these grandparents who took in this problem child, the image of them running from her, probably holding their hands up to stop the knife from going in their bodies, it's one of the worst things I can imagine.
Holly and Sandy have checked off part 1 of their brutal to-do list. They quickly run through the next 3 items: keys, money, jewelry. It seems organized, but young killers are still children. They rarely think beyond impetuous short-term goals. Their plan cost 2 lives, but soon they run out of ideas.
Holly and Sandy's crime was a reflection of what was going on in their heads, which was pretty much nothing. It was poorly thought out, poorly planned, poorly executed.
They drove over to the friend's house, reported to the friends the reason that they were bloody was that they had been accosted by someone and had been attacked by someone. But later on, they confessed in a very giggly manner that they had actually killed Holly's grandparents.
The friends are horrified. It's not long before police trace their truck and their cell phone calls. Holly and Sandy's dream of a new life of freedom is over.
Holly very much resented authority. She very much resented people who wouldn't let her do whatever she wanted to do.
To criminal profiler Candace DeLong, Holly was sending out all the warning signals of a deadly young woman. If she didn't kill her grandparents, someone else would have felt her fury.
What might she have done later in life if she were not caught to someone who wouldn't share their soda pop with her? Dangerous, dangerous woman.
Broken and remorseful, Sandy Ketchum is jailed for life. Defiant to the very end, Holly Harvey now serves 2 life sentences.
The very thing that she fought against, she is now going to be subjected to for the rest of her life. She has someone telling her when to get up, when to go to bed. She has rules that she has to follow. It is ironic, the very authority that she fought with the Colliers, that she's subjected to now and will be hopefully for the rest of her life.
Teenage killers rarely act on their own. The same forces that drive them to dress alike can make them kill.
Peer pressure can be a very big factor in a group of people. Oftentimes, kids or adults will do things in a group that they would never do individually.
Peer pressure exploded into bloodshed in Gary, Indiana, in the mid-1980s.
Well, Ruth Pelky, we called her Nana. That was the affectionate name that the family had for her. She took a real special love for each one of us grandkids, and we were all special to her. And, she treated us all very fair and equal.
Bill Pelky remembers the kind warmth of his grandmother, Ruth.
Her real love, her real passion was telling Bible stories to young kids. We cut out pictures of Bible characters and she put them up on this a board and tell the stories.
Neighborhood children gather in Mrs. Pelky's home for her lessons.
It's what she loved to do. And so at the age of 78 years old, it was one more chance for her to share her faith with young people.
Not all her students have such good intentions. In reaching out to help, Mrs. Pelky has made herself a target.
When these 4 girls knocked on her door and said they want to take Bible lessons, Nana said, come on in.
I've been in this business for almost 35 years as a prosecutor, a judge, and a defense lawyer now. And I've never seen a crime like this where young girls committed such a senseless, heinous act.
Indiana prosecutor Jack Crawford is marked forever by Ruth Pelky's killing.
Ruth Pelky was probably one of the nicest persons anyone would ever want to meet. That girls, teenage girls, could decide on a school afternoon to go and murder someone is completely shocking, and it's a case that has never left me, and I'll never forget.
Ruth Pelky's fate is being shaped by a small gang of teenage girls. Karen Corders, Denise Thomas, and April Beverly are all classmates. Their leader is 15-year-old Paula Cooper.
Paula Cooper is yet another young killer who came from a horrible, horrible background.
Paula's short life so far is a horror story of drugs and violence.
Father was very abusive. He would do things like, beat her with an electrical cord.
She was in and out of school. She watched her mother being sexually assaulted. All of these things led to a very, very disturbed young woman.
And I think that Paula learned one thing well by the age of 15, that was how to hate.
Paula Cooper's hate is about to erupt.
Paula planned it with 3 other young girls who were high school classmates of hers. And they had had a discussion amongst themselves about places where they thought they could get some money.
Do y'all even have money? You want to go IK, you don't have money? You got money. I don't have money. I didn't got money.
And one of the girls, April Beverly, came up with the idea that she knew a Bible studies teacher in the neighborhood who she thought might have some cash on hand.
Mrs. Pelky is far from wealthy, but the 78-year-old is trusting and defenseless.
I'm April.
The perfect victim.
Paula Cooper was on a path of destruction. She wanted to kill someone. They chose to kill someone who was helpless, someone they knew they could talk their way into.
Ruth Pelky opens her door with love in her heart. But she innocently lets in seething hate.
I got a phone call from my brother-in-law. Just had gotten off work, and he told me that Nana had died.
Bill Pelky's Nana is 78-year-old Ruth Pelky, a gentle grandmother living in a decaying blue-collar town.
Her family had encouraged her to move out because it was a changing neighborhood. But she was so committed to the young people there, she wanted to stay and offer her Bible studies classes to the teenagers in that area, which she did, of course, for free.
In 1985, 4 girls knock on Mrs. Pelky's door, asking about Bible school. She already knows April Beverly from previous classes. The girls are welcomed in. Schoolgirls from the 9th grade are about to become a pack of killers, led by Paula Cooper.
Paula grabbed a vase and hit Mrs. Pelky over the head, knocking her to the floor. Paula had brought with her from April's house a 12-inch butcher knife.
See this knife? I'm gonna cut you.
Paula jumped on her and started demanding to know where the money was. In fact, the quote was, "Where's the money, bitch?"
Where's your money? Where's the money? Where's your money?
The pack mentality has taken over.
The ringleader becomes empowered by the fact that she or he has followers. The mere fact that they're there encourages the ringleader to do bigger, bolder things than they normally would.
Mrs. Pelky pleads that she doesn't have any money. Paula responds with torture.
Paula started cutting Mrs. Pelky with the butcher knife. She was cutting her back and forth across her chest. Paula stabbed Mrs. Pelky in the chest. The evidence was that at some point she started reciting the Lord's Prayer. Obviously, she knew she was going to die.
And it's Paula Cooper who orders her death.
Paula told Karen to push the knife through Mrs. Pelky's body, which she did. And in fact, the knife made an indentation in the floor. It was a horrendous murder.
Money might have been the apparent motive, but I believe the motive was to kill Ruth Pelky, and the robbery was incidental. You don't stab someone 33 times because you want their watch. They went there to kill her.
She was on the dining room floor. That's where my father found her body. It's the dining room where our family gathered every year for Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving and birthdays and happy, joyous occasions. And every time I would think about Nana, I would picture her butchered on that dining room floor, and it was just a terrible, painful thing to even think about Nana.
Mrs. Pelky built a life on family and trust. Paula Cooper learned to trust no one.
I think the attacks on Ruth Pelky were so vicious because that's what was in Paula's heart, a rage to destroy something because she had been destroyed so many times in her 15 years on this earth.
The girls leave the house with just $10 and the keys to Mrs. Pelky's car. Paula leaves her jacket behind. In the pocket, a prescription for birth control pills with her name on it. Young killers are rarely hard to catch.
Most young people think they're not going to get caught at anything. Shoplifting a candy bar, let alone murder. They tend to think they're smarter than everyone else. And also, they tend to not cover up their crime so well. And they're oftentimes surprised when they get caught.
Even more surprised are the residents of Gary.
Once the community realized it was young people and then young girls, there was shock in the community that 4 young teenage girls could commit a crime like this. People couldn't believe it.
Paula Cooper is found guilty of murder. At age 16, she becomes the youngest person ever on Indiana's death row. Her 3 followers get lengthy prison terms. Bill Pelky felt justice had been done for his grandmother.
I originally supported the death sentence for Paula Cooper.
But after much soul-searching, he finds forgiveness. While Ruth Pelky's life was taken without mercy, Bill Pelky campaigns to save her killer.
And I knew I no longer wanted her to die, and I wanted to do whatever I could do to try to help her. And I learned the most important lesson of my life, the healing power of forgiveness. Because when my heart was touched with compassion, forgiveness took place. And it brought a tremendous healing.
After intervention from the Pope and a petition of 2 million signatures, Paula's sentence is commuted to life. Paula Cooper was exactly the kind of child Ruth Pelky was trying to help. Sparing her life would be Ruth's final gift.
My grandmother did a lot of praying, and she had a special love for young people. So people like Paula Cooper that my grandmother really had a concern for. I'm convinced she would have forgave Paula Cooper.
These deadly women became killers while they were still girls. Scarred by abuse, they were young, impetuous, and dangerous. Haunted by her dark past, Mary Bell killed to take control. Holly Harvey brutally lashed out at authority. And Paula Cooper's boiling hate destroyed an innocent victim. Young girls act on impulse. They don't consider the consequences. And often, they're beyond suspicion. That makes the young bloods some of the deadliest women of all.